Hey everyone, thanks again for tuning in to BiblioTech on Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
I'm Israel.
And today we have another book talk episode for you. If you caught our first one, we went over If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Kawamura, available on Cloud Library. That was a fun one. And today we have The Family Izquierdo by Ruben Degollado, also available on Cloud Library. So a little bit about it. Israel's going to talk about it real quick.
So before I get into the summary about the book, I wanted to give a little bit about who Ruben Degollado is. So he had a young adult novel, Throw, which was published in 2019, and it actually won the Texas Institute of Letters 2020 award for Best Young Adult Novel Book. It was included on the Texas Library Association 2020 list of best books for teen readers and was a Christianity Today 2020 Book of Merit. Now getting into the book that we're going to be talking about today, Ruben's debut literary novel, The Family Izquierdo, published in 2022 by W.W. Norton, was longlisted for the PEN Faulkner Award, is a Texas Institute of Letters Best Fiction Award finalist, and New York Times Best Review Editor's Choice, and Kirkus Review's Best Book of 2022. Ruben has been an educator since 1994, serving as a tutor, teacher, assistant principal, and director of school improvement. He has been married to his wife, Julie, for over 25 years, and they live with their 3 children on a ranch in Texas. So a little bit about the book now, a quick summary. The tight-knit Izquierdo family is grappling with misfortunes none of them can explain. Their beloved patriarch has suffered from an emotional collapse and is dying. Eldest son Gonzalo's marriage is falling apart. Daughter Dina, beleaguered by the fear that her nightmares are real, is a shut-in. When Gonzalo digs up a strange object in the backyard of the family home, the Izquierdos take it as proof that a jealous neighbor has cursed them. Could this be the reason for all their troubles? As the Izquierdos face a distressing present and an uncertain future, they are sustained by the blood that binds them, a divine presence, and an abiding love for one another. Told in a series of soulful voices brimming with warmth and humor, The Family Izquierdo is a tender narrative of a family at a turning point. So that's a little bit about Ruben and about the book, a quick summary of the book. We actually had a submission from Assistant Branch Manager for BiblioTech EDU, Rosa. So I'm just going to read that. As a Latina, I appreciated the narrative spotlight on a Latino family, with the author skillfully weaving Spanish and colloquial language into the characters' dialogues. The tale of the Izquierda family, culminating in the loss of patriarch Papa Tavo, is conveyed throughout various family members, vignettes, and time jumps. It remains easy to follow. The book offers several relatable themes such as religion, family customs, and interpersonal dynamics, along with the more unique theme of a family fate being dictated by a curse. Overall, it made for a delightful read. So yeah, she really touched on it. There were so many components to this book. It was a great read. I really enjoyed it. What's your overall thoughts?
Very interesting. The family dynamic was definitely, the center point of the book. It really went in depth with characters and just different points of views. It was really cool.
Yeah, I thought so as well. Like I loved the book. I thought Rosanna was the one that chose this book because she saw it at the San Antonio Book Festival. She just randomly decided to pick it up because it was the last book available, and then so that made all of us read it. And now I'm super grateful that we stumbled upon it because I related to every single bit of the book. I really loved it. It really took me back to my history with my family. So I overall really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of parts of the book that I could relate to as a Mexican-American and Hispanic individual myself. And I really enjoyed it overall. I thought that giving us in-depth understandings of the family members' perspectives, where they're coming from, how they're affected by the curse, or even lack of curse, I guess. I thought that was done really, really well. It culminated to an ending that made a lot of sense. And I'm glad that we received the ending that we did. We do have some questions to guide us. The first one, just getting into the first one. What aspect of the Family Izquierdo resonated with you the most? Did you find any particular characters or events relatable or memorable?
I would probably say what stands out the most is definitely the religious aspect that plays into everything with the family. Because we see it from, casual perspective to just the extremist of extremes. And with Catholicism, it can go definitely either way. You could have the family that goes to church, maybe just on holidays, or maybe they don't even go to church, but, se persinan y todo. And then you have, the ones who have that religious experience, who, just completely immerse themselves in everything. They go to church every day. They pray, to todos los santos, everything. Might even have, like holy light, or I guess like in the book, levitating and different phenomena.
Yeah.
So it's something that, at least for us here in San Antonio, it's very, commonplace.
Definitely.
And that's definitely where a lot of the book itself, like the stories, just kind of come from.
Yeah, definitely. One of the characters that left an impression on me was Cirillo.
Loved
right?
him.
Yeah, he was maybe 17, 18, going on 18.
He was a senior in high school.
Like late teens, very late teens.
And I really enjoyed that. Even though his mother and father had a falling out with his grandparents, he would still go over to the house when they had like parties and fiestas and different types of celebrations. I would see that growing up in my family, where some cousins of mine or some aunts and uncles would have a falling out with my grandparents, and only some of them would show up, or others wouldn't show up, right? And I thought that was really, I really like that. And it just really goes to show that in this book, there's so many parts that I identify with, right? For example, like Christmas, when they celebrated Christmas, giving out the gifts and everything like that, all the kids, everyone present. It's a big deal, at least in my family, right? We wait till like 12 o'clock, till midnight to open up the gifts. And we have like all this food and everyone's present. And it's one of the times where everyone gets together. And so that was really one memorable part for me. Did y'all have anything else that y'all?
So like I mentioned earlier, I thought every single part of the book I just like completely related to wholeheartedly. To like every single character, I just like flashed back on my own family. Because I had almost like the exact same experiences, from having a really close-knit family where there's like all this drama, and then grandfather going into a nursing home, going through that. Like that was all just, and then like going every single Sunday to your grandpa's house with church's chicken. I was like, man, we are all really living the same life, aren't we? Like there's no originality anymore, because I related to everything. But I really liked like every single part of it. But like the two characters that I really resonated with was Maggie and the Anita. I liked Maggie because she was a very empathetic person, which is something that I really relate to. She was a cosmetologist, and she said that there was some customers who people wouldn't really take in. For instance, Teddy was one of the family members, or one of the family members' neighbors, who they didn't say that he was like autistic or special needs, but it comes coded. It comes across that it's very hard for him to get a haircut.
Or just like socialize in general.
And that as well. So Maggie just originally, like as soon as she sees him, she's like, I'm going to take him in, and I already know what I'm going to do to help him, And I really resonated with that. And then with the Anita as well, I resonated with her because she was obsessed with the Virgin Mary, and she wanted to be like a saint herself, and really was thinking of ways of how she can just be the most pure and religious. And that's how I used to be growing up.
Rosanna, were there any characters that resonated with you or that stood out to you?
So for sure, like Ruby said, I absolutely loved Maggie. She was probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite. Shared with another character, but I'll get into that in a bit. Because Maggie, she is, out of pretty much everyone of like the second generation of Izquierdos, she's the only one that doesn't really have a family, doesn't, have kids, a husband, whatever. And she really, it doesn't focus in on that. It doesn't focus on her lack of family. It focuses on how she helps other people by extending her, her abilities, that empath,
Yeah.
And I just thought that was like a nice kind of different and a little kind of a refreshing perspective compared to all the other family drama. Because while everyone else is, definitely focused on Papa, not to say she's not, because she's definitely involved, but she also isn't afraid to prioritize, some of her customers, some of the people that, like Ruby said, like when Teddy goes in, she lets him go in front of the other people. And when the other gentleman who lost his wife comes in and needs help too, she prioritizes him, lets him go in front of other people by telling the ladies waiting, he called beforehand.
Yeah.
Make your appointments. But I really liked her, and she just seemed very likable. Like she was so sure of herself. She, one thing that she mentioned, she's like, soy un, poco llenita, pero, that's nothing wrong with me, It's so I kind of like that it touched on that a little bit too, compared to another member of the family, Marisol. Because Marisol, she's very into fad diets, always concerned about her weight, trying to look good, I guess, for her man, which is kind of a thing in Latino culture as well. And that's something you see very prominent. And you can see that Marisol, with her family and her husband, her kids, you would think that she would feel fulfilled and not worry about stuff like that, compared to Maggie, who doesn't have that, but she's like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
So I really like that. And I'm not trying to like dunk on anyone. That's just kind of how I saw it.
Yeah.
I definitely have a couple of like cousins and tias that are
Like
into the next fad diet.
Herbalife.
Which is, I mean, no problem. More power to you.
Exactly.
But that you're saying the differences between Marisol and Maggie, I think it's just really a testament to who they are as people.
Exactly.
Right? They're
Exactly.
completely two different people, right? They could grow up in the same household, but they have entirely different personalities, different priorities, and things like that. And that's what I love. I think that's what Ruben did great, Mr. Degollado. That in each chapter being specifically about one of the family members, I think it touched and it allowed the readers, it allowed myself to really understand, where all these people are coming from, right? Who they are and how they all connect as a family and why they work as a family as well. So getting into the next question, in the Family Izquierdo, how does the author explore themes of family, identity, and cultural heritage? Can you identify any specific passages or scenes that exemplify these themes?
So I kind of want to go into that by starting off with Cyril, another character that like really I thought was neat, only because he's very, so we have that issue that comes up with the Anita, where one of Cyril's friends is kind of into her, even though there's, first of all, red flag. There's a bit of an age difference right there in maturity level. So,
Dianita was 13, and I want to say Cirilo and his friends were like 17, 18.
Yes. So, that's already, they mentioned the whole, women mature quicker than guys. Regardless, the age difference, that's still problematic. So let's put that there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, long story short, his friend takes interest in her, and she's kind of, that's like an ego boost for her. But then he goes into her room at night, and I don't think anything happens. He tries to put the moves on her.
Yeah.
But I think that's when she like kicks him out, and she's crying.
Yeah.
And Cirio immediately like sees her crying, and he's like,
I know it was this dude.
guy.
Yeah.
Beats the shit out of him.
And I like it because Cirio, he's like, when it comes to like Gonzalo and Braulio, they definitely seem much more like gruff and more like, ¿Qué onda, vato? Stuff like that. Cirio, he still like commands respect, but it doesn't seem as prominent. Like, you don't want to mess with him, but at the same time, he doesn't seem to be into so much the macho persona.
Yeah.
Like, there's a scene where he's younger where he talks about like when his when Papa Tavo gives him a knife, and he kind of sees that as like being, a man now.
Yeah.
But I just enjoy it. That's kind of like different generation, different perspective. He's just not so much macho as the family. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit tied to, I guess, machismo in a way. That's very prominent in Latino culture.
Yeah, definitely. So Cirilio and Yanira are cousins, and I think what allows Cirilio to sort of get by almost that machismo, that pride that comes with it, is that he's younger. I mean, he's a different generation from his parents. He's a different generation from his aunt and uncle, right? So he experiences the world a lot differently, right? And so I think that's why he has an understanding of where the line is, right? Even as much as like where my parents disrespected my grandparents, but they're still my grandparents, and I'm going to go, right? Because at one point in the book, he says that the grandmother, Valentina, she's extremely happy when at least one person from each family is present.
Yeah.
Right? And so he fulfills that, right? And then he sees here, in the situation with Dianira, it's almost like he doesn't even think. It's as you said, he puts it together and he just acts.
Yeah.
Right? He acts. And I think that's why we see that he's deliberate, and we see that, you know, when he needs to be
like decisive,
quick on his feet, he will.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. We also see more themes like family themes and identity and cultural heritage. They're extremely Catholic, as we've stated.
Very
Extremely Catholic. And this resonated, this aspect, this theme in the book resonated with me because I come from a highly Catholic family. I have 2 brothers who are priests. I have a brother who does missionary work. I was thinking about being a priest as well. I got married. And so how almost fanatic they are and how devoted they are, I have seen that in my family, right? Where you pass by a church, you do the sign of the cross. I think in one part, and you mentioned this, Rosanna, in one part of the book, it was either the friend of the family,
one of the friends, Lourdes, I believe. Hang on, let me...
And that she she was to the point where even if she saw a sign pointing to the church, she would do the sign of the cross, right? The theme of Catholicism is throughout the novel, right? And I think it's a good juxtaposition to the other theme of brujeria, right? It isn't so much like curanderia and like natural medicines and things like that. It's dark magic.
Yeah.
Like
it can be, because brujeria, it depends on how you see it.
Oh yeah.
Brujeria can be good magic and bad
definitely,
magic.
but this novel definitely just
leans
focuses
into
on the dark magic.
It emphasizes,
like the urine, the goat hooves, and all that
burying
bad
stuff in their yard.
Yeah.
And then the stabbing of like voodoo dolls.
But also it kind of ties into like if you give power to it too. Like if you believe in it, it's kind of like how people, you know, they believe in religion, they believe in a god, you give power to that. Well, the same thing could be said for brujeria. You give power to it if you believe in it, if you let it. So I kind of thought that was interesting because it also makes me think of a quote from a show with ties into a different Latino family, One Day at a Time on Netflix, focuses on a Cuban family. But abuelita, she's like, brujeria. I don't believe in it, but I respect it. And I'm like, I get that.
That's a
so
good
that's what
line.
it makes me think of. But I just think it just all ties back to, do you give that thing power? Do you give it power over you? And with the whole religious thing, it's also, I feel like the family relies on religion to kind of absolve them of taking responsibility for certain things that happen in the book. Again, this is just my own perspective. Because there are certain things that are elaborated on. For example, we'll probably get into this a little bit at the end, but what the curse kind of stems from. And we get, I guess that's like the catalyst, I think jumping point. So it just kind of...
No, well, I think
sorry.
what you're trying to say is like, because they mention it in the book too, where he says when Papa Tavo starts acting out, going through his nervous breakdowns, he's like, I don't know if it's a curse, because they haven't seen any signs of a curse yet, or if it's just the stress from moving all of his family, you know, over here.
Yes, that too.
And then all of the stress that he'd had to build a business, to make sure, like, he has a really big family, you know, and like, was it him that would be dreaming of his kids starving as well, Papa Tavo?
I think that was Dina. Because I think
so.
Dina
had... it might have been Papa Tavo.
Maybe
but
it was
forgive me
Papa
if I'm
Tavo.
wrong.
I think it was. Yeah, I think you're right.
He did have nervous breakdowns, and he did have a lot of dreams and stress about his family, you know, not doing well.
Yeah.
So they're just like, I don't know if that's a curse or if that's just him, you know, finally breaking, you know, because he had to work his entire life so hard, you know, when it started in 1958, right? Where I think they moved to McAllen. Yeah. So he's been having to work hard his whole entire life, you know, not having a childhood and having to have just a really big, strong man presence in the family. So it could just be that, you know, he's just breaking. And then just because that he's breaking, the whole family starts breaking, you know, because they don't have that strong male figure in their life anymore.
Exactly.
So that's what I think your perspective leans a little bit on.
A little bit, yeah. And you know, we see that all the time in Latino families where, you know, you have the man who's just working so hard, you know, whether it's like 40 plus hours a week, 2-3 jobs to sustain their family. Like I've seen, you know, families where the father just overworked themselves. Like they worked themselves to a point where they couldn't work anymore. They were bedridden for years. And it was just, and it was for, a fairly large family, not like, to the extent of the Izquierdos, but it was devastating to see just because, you grow up seeing these strong men and all of a sudden to have just one moment of, I can't work anymore, just completely like render them, it's sad. It's very sad. So kind of seeing this happening to Papa Tavo, that's, you could say it's definitely stress induced, not just
for sure.
brujeria, which I mean, it definitely played a part.
I think so there's something called self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Where we hold these ideas about, a certain topic or ourselves, and when we encounter a situation or when something happens to us, we'll be like, oh, see, it's the curse. It's the curse, right? And so it almost allows the family to continue, doing some, not positive behaviors. Like, for example, the mother who was just stayed in the house.
Dina,
Didn't move, didn't leave, didn't even go to the quinceañera of her daughter, right? Her husband was just there by himself. And, so I can see how, on the other side with religion and with their Catholicism, how it can I can see that it can be used as something to displace blame, displace certain things that are happening, like a very external locus of control, right? I don't have any control. It's, in God's hands, right? But, how much of it is in God's hands?
Yeah, like you have to take responsibility for certain things or accept that maybe this happened because of X reason.
And that can be very difficult, finding a balance, how much is my responsibility and how much does God really have influence, right? Because, like God gives freedom of choice to do, what we want. So how much of it is really freedom of choice? How much is it just God just doing his thing, right? One thing that I found kind of interesting was, do we ever see them at church?
No.
That's kind of a funny thing. I never thought about that.
Right?
No, they're always like praying at home. Like I know the grandma, Valentina, yes.
Valentina.
That she, when the last daughter moves out, she builds the room into be a shrine.
Yes.
So then that's where she goes to pray every single day. And then I want to say Dina, when she can't leave the house, then she builds her own little version of a shrine as well. So that way she can pray every single day as well. But yeah, they don't go to church, but they have like their own way of it at home to practice their Catholicism.
And we will be back after these messages.
Check out BiblioTech's newest resource, Financial Fit. Get yourself in financial shape. This free financial literacy program is for those who are interested in learning about their financial wellness. There's free informative videos, lessons, plans and practices, and interactive tools, such as making decisions on buying a home, renting a home, living with roommates, buying a car, buying a major purchase, and more. Check it out free with your library card today.
And now we're back.
So it's almost like as if it's religiosity and not prescription to a organized religion. So while they are Catholic, I think I'd like to understand the question, well, why, if they're so Catholic, why don't we see them at church in this book?
Not like even one family member. As big as the family is, might be wrong in this, but I don't recall ever reading about even just a single family member being at church.
Yeah, like is there mention of like a priest? Is there mention of taking communion? Is there mention of them getting married through the church? Because I would think a family who's highly Catholic would get married through the church.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because there's one point in the book too, in the beginning, when Gonzalo brings a man to get rid of the curse, but is he a priest?
I want to say he is a priest. Now I'm like kind of doubting that, but I feel like
I thought he wasn't, because Victoria mentions, but he's not even a real priest, or she's mentioned something like that along those lines.
No, that's right. But is he even a priest? Tú sabes bien que no, Victoria.
Yeah, see? That's
okay, so he's not a priest, but
Yeah.
I guess he's like, but yeah, you're right. He is not
See,
a priest.
so even that, like, I wonder.
Why wouldn't you bring a real priest?
Yeah, and so now I wonder what the intentions are, with the author, and as to why it was like that. I think it really is like, families can be religious and prescribe to themes from an organized religion, but still have their own beliefs as a family, their own dynamics and how it influences their family, all type of stuff, which I think, great. If it works for your family, that's a great thing. Another theme, a cultural theme is, many times already you've spoken in Spanish. In this book, we get snippets of Spanish, right?
Oh yeah, it's
of
very
of the family
ingrained.
talking Spanish, right? And so, I mean, going back and forth between English and Spanish, I mean, I grew up with that as well.
Like, it just
Yeah.
flows so naturally, and
does,
I
yeah.
really like that and
Like,
appreciate it.
I want to, since you brought that up, I did want to mention we read on Amazon a negative review for this book. That person mentioned that he didn't like the fact that he went back and forth with the Spanish because he sometimes says a whole sentence in Spanish and then doesn't translate. So he was upset about that because I'm assuming this person didn't understand Spanish. But I liked that. Like, I'm sorry, like, those people who don't understand Spanish, they're not going to understand that. I mean, just go Google Translate and figure it out for yourself, because I personally liked that the author does both, because that resonated a lot with me when I started thinking back reading the book, because when I was in middle school, I remember write, like, in one of my English classes, I would write my essay because I was very fluent in both, and I would sometimes forget I was speaking Spanish and thought, it just flowed easily, so I would write in my essays in English and Spanish.
Flex.
And then I remember one of my teachers got after me for doing that, and she was like, that this is frowned upon, you can't be doing this, you can't be going back and forth. And I was like, I didn't even realize I was doing it, So I really admire that this author, just really stuck to his guns and really stayed true to that. Because it just made the book just that much more relatable and comfortable.
Yeah. I think that review was just dumb. Like, personally, it's like, dude, the book was not, I'm just biased also because, again, I had no problem reading it. But it's like the book wasn't catered for you. The book was talking about the Latina experience, the Latina family. Like, if you go into this book knowing or assuming that there's probably going to be some Spanish phrases and assume it's going to be translated for you, my guy, you are just, no.
And then going back to a little bit more about the review, he felt that it was unrelatable because he felt like the family had too much drama and too much stuff going on.
These families are real, and
Yeah,
these families are pretty much everywhere.
I was like, man, how did this guy grow up? Did he not? I want to be with him, with his family, if he did not have to deal with that much drama.
Yeah, that review we could do a whole other episode on, because, I mean, I'll say it, I think it's ridden with racism, If you're going to read a book that you don't culturally identify with, then I think there's some responsibility to understanding the culture.
Exactly. Like, there's plenty of books that, I read all the time, and I might not understand things about the culture or what the practices mean, but I'm not going to go and, just dunk on them. Like, if anything, that's going to prompt me to do more research or learn more about it and be like, oh, so this is why they do this thing. This is why they say, this thing.
Yeah, because like I said, like, every single just bit of this book was just so relatable for me. Like, to all the practices that they were doing. They even did the egg,
The egg.
Yeah.
That was, oh man.
So a little bit about how the book is structured, right? We've mentioned this before, that it's structured, it goes back in time, it goes into the present. It doesn't go into the future, but
well, I guess
in
kind of a
time.
little bit.
Yeah,
Towards the
okay.
end.
Oh yeah, a little bit towards the end, but that's more so the present.
It's like,
that's how I took it.
it's
Yeah.
Like,
the
I took it as
future to, I guess, the event.
I mean, that could be argued as well. We could make an argument for that. So each chapter or section is from the perspective of a family member, and so we've kind of been hinting at it, that the curse starts, or the family migrates from Mexico to McAllen, to Texas, and then there's a curse enacted. They begin, experiencing certain things, situations. They live their lives. They have a giant family. And then it culminates in the end of the book where we learn why this curse occurred, right? It was actually, in my opinion, I believe the family was cursed.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it was a mixture of, as you said, Rosanna, a mixture of prescribing to their religiosity and Catholicism, right? But then also, it's also that they were cursed. I think so. Did any of y'all want to talk a little bit about, how that curse came to be, the characters involved? I mean, the whole family's involved, but, the specific characters.
Okay, so probably the catalyst for everything that happens in this book, the curse. So what happens with that is Gonzalo Sr., I believe the oldest daughter of Papa Tavo and Valentina, he gets involved with El Brujo Contreras, which in the name itself is, the
Not sus enough.
Exactly. He places the curse on the family because Gonzalo takes interest in Irais, and she reciprocates, to an extent. And they have their moment. After that, Gonzalo's like, I don't want anything to do with you. This was just, kind of a one-night thing. And she is pretty much like, I love you. Let's be together.
Distraught,
Which, I mean, you could probably attribute to being, a teenager at that time. Just really, going wholeheartedly with the feelings and the hormones. But, she's like, fine, you're going to regret it. She tells her dad, and then the dad's like,
let me take things
we're going to get this guy.
Yeah.
So he places a curse on the family and pretty much asks Satan to afflict everyone with susto and sadness, and also just, mess with the whole family, which is interesting because from there could be different perspectives about it. It's kind of dubious because was what happened between them consensual? That's definitely like a thing that stands out, but also Gonzalo and most of the rest of the guys, which is why like that Cirio differs from that, as mentioned earlier. They kind of subscribe to the whole, us Izquierdo, man, it's in our blood. Like, ladies can't resist us. Exactly. That kind of just regressive way of thinking, which for their time period,
makes sense.
It makes sense. It's prominent. It's not correct, but
And then
it's
Contreras
there.
Contreras even mentioned that the name Izquierdo itself was like a bad name because it meant
because in Latin, I believe, sinestro is left, and of course it's tied to the word sinister.
Yeah. So he was like, how dare y'all boast this name, be proud of this name, you have this name on all your work vans. So he was also very jealous of that too.
Yeah, that's the main reason they seem to think that the curse happened was because of Brujo Contreras' jealousy towards Papa Tavo, and the plot of land he picked and the hard work he put in. That kind of seems to be, and what for most of the book we're led to believe that he's just a jealous old man who is just like, I'm gonna be petty and curse this family because they're doing much better than I did. But lo and behold, we find out what actually happened. But like with everything, it came with a cost, because it does mention that Brujo Contreras' other children, they all died, including Irais. Like his other 3 children died. The only one that's left is Lina, who is mentioned towards the end when we read about, Brujo Contreras and his passing.
And we will be back after these messages.
Summer is still rolling, and so is Around the World with BiblioTech. Check out our summer reading program for the year 2023. That'll run from June 5th to August 31st. Check the events calendar at our website, bearbibliotech.org, so you can visit many countries for free. Check out Japan, Greece, Costa Rica, Mexico, and more.
And now we're back.
Okay, so now that we have a deeper understanding of the curse, where it came from, why it actually happened, right? Not just because he was a jealous individual, but because, his daughter in his eyes was taken advantage of. I want to, introduce another question. Were there any specific scenes or moments in the Family Izquierdo that resonated with y'all or left a lasting impact? Can you describe them and explain why they were significant to you?
I mean, there's a couple, but if y'all want to go first, because I feel like I've talked a lot, so.
There's a couple for me too, but I think one that really, like, when I was reading it, I just put the book down and really reflected on my own life was, we've mentioned before how relatable this book is, but one of the parts that really resonated with me was when Papa Tavo went into the nursing home. Like I mentioned before, I dealt with that myself, my own grandfather going into the nursing home, and then Cirilo is reflecting and talking about visiting him, going through the nursing home and just not liking it. And then he mentions how the younger cousins, he's like, man, they're not seeing Papa Tavo the way we all saw him. They're seeing him in his most vulnerable state right now. That's why they don't want to be there, because they're bored, just like, we're here with this old man, who is not really understanding everything that's going on. So that, like, just how relatable and how real. I'm like, man, this author obviously went through this as well. And it was exactly what my family went through. So it brought a tear to my eye, because I was like, man, this is the way he's describing this scene is so real. It's so true to the point, of watching that Papa Tavo change from the strong man who worked so hard his whole entire life to now being in the nursing home and not, and so that's what really resonated with me, just how relatable that scene was.
I want to piggyback on that a little bit, not sharing your experience, but like it kind of ties to like when my mom, she would talk about like, her great grandfather, because he lived to be like 104, and she would always talk about him like in the young days, like, them getting them candy and taking them somewhere in El Salvador, just all of these things. And he built their house too, the one that they lived in growing up. But the only version that I know is the one I would see in pictures, and it was just, older gentleman, wheelchair bound, just white hair, white mustache. So I don't know what, I can only imagine her and, the experience and how she really loved her grandfather, as opposed to the version that I know of my great grandfather, which is just that, which I'm like, I can kind of identify with that, but not to the extent of, actually seeing
but Cirilo mentions that as well, where he's like, the younger cousins are only able to see the pictures, of the grandpa doing so much, for the other cousins, like buying them ice cream, taking them out, playing dominoes with them, he mentions that as well. So,
and then like kind of going off with that too, like little Gonzalo, he mentioned, like you said, he mentions that he has no idea, but then at the end when we get Seferino's perspective, he remembers like doing stuff, because he's part of that generation with little Gonzalo, but he's older and he remembers the maps that Papa Tavo would bust out and just doing things with them. So he's definitely someone also that like did live through seeing that, eventual just
decline.
Decline.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring that up, really, Ruby, because that is exactly a big one, and I see that present in my life today. Really, now that I'm older, I'm able to reflect. Because like you, Rosanna, all my grandparents, I saw them as bedridden, in a wheelchair. My aunts and uncles taking care of them, but my elder siblings, the experiences that they had with my grandparents were completely different. It was going to their house all the time, spending the night with my grandparents, and my grandmother always cooking, always doing things. My grandfather always in the backyard, in his plant and his matas, right? And I think that what this book does great is it shows us the cultural value of familismo, right? Which is, within Hispanic culture, it's a strong identification with and loyalty to the nuclear family, but also the extended family, right? So aunts and uncles, cousins, right? And one of the things that, one of the scenes or instances that happens in the book that left like a strong impression on me was the ascension of Teresa, right?
Honestly, all the daughters, but like Teresa's was just the one that was like
the most
extreme.
Yeah. And it left an impression on me for two reasons. One, did she float? Like, did she legit float? I mean, and that I like that question isn't answered in the book. Yes, it did happen, right? And then even throughout the book too, they don't really. The family doesn't really be like, hey, let's have a discussion.
Let's talk about it again.
Let's talk about this. Like, wow.
They just got to take it at face value.
Yeah.
Like, let's put her on TV because
yeah,
who
right?
does that?
So it was at the quinceañera of Teresa, right? And her dad
Kind of has beef.
So Eusebio is he's like the brother-in-law, right? So he isn't izquierdo, right? I guess, for lack of a better term. And so Eusebio is pretty well off compared to, you know, some of the other family members. He has his business, and he has beef with Braulio and the entire family because he kind of feels like an outsider, you know. You're not izquierdo to an extent, right? And so at the quinceañera, we learn a little bit about their beef, right? Because Eusebio had a restaurant, right? And another restaurant across the street opened, and Braulio, who owned his own I guess construction company
I
of the
believe
type,
so.
he helped that other
Yeah.
Mexican restaurant, you know, be built.
Yeah.
All right, he was contracted, and in the book it says that Eusebio ran across the street, you know, with looking directly at Braulio and being like, "What are you doing?" And Braulio's like, "Well, you know, I can't turn this down. You have to understand."
Yeah.
Right. And so for that and many other reasons, they have this beef. But at the quinceañera, when Teresa ascends, everyone's like, "What is going on?" And one of the parts one of the parts of the book that I really like is it says Braulio placed a hand on Eusebio's shoulder and quietly said, "Tu hijita, compadre," and he flinched and leaned away as he tried and reassert himself, but Braulio kept his hand there. Absent in his touch was any implicit challenge, the proving of one's man against another. There was only a consolation of wrongs that needed mending brought on by Teresa before them, and the foolishness of their grudge was now laid bare. And so Eusebio goes, "Ay, pues sí, compadre." And so I really like that because within families, you know, you can have grudges, right? You know, there are, you know, instances in my own family where, you know, a niece or one of my own brothers and sisters or even my parents, you know, something happens and I kind of hold a grudge and it takes me putting my pride to the side. Well, in some families that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? People stand firm, and we see it in this book with Cyril's parents not going to any of the events.
Yeah.
Right? Because of an instance that happened between, you know, with his grandparents, right? But it's like this almost like natural phenomena, like disasters, right? Something beyond our understanding, something that really brings the family together where they're forced to be like, we're family. We have to put our differences aside and any grudges we might feel. They're forced to put that to the side.
Yeah.
And I have seen that. I have seen that in my own family where a situation happens with one of my family members and the whole family gets together and be like, "Hey, look, you know, this is what's going on. And we need to, you know, be together right now.
Set aside stuff and
we need to set
focus
things
on
aside
this.
and focus on this, you know? And I really like that because I think that's true because it could be to the point where there's a birth in the family. You know, there's a baptism, or there's a death in the family. And I've had instances where my uncles won't go to the funeral of their brother, you know? So not even in death can we, you know, for whatever reason, put our pride to the side or anything like that, you know, to honor their siblings. No, it takes natural disaster. It takes things like the pandemic, right? It takes even, you know, crazy things like Teresa ascending, right? For Braulio and Eusebio to be like, "Hey, man, you know, we got to put our, you know, our machismo aside. You know, like this is crazy."
Yeah. Going back to the whole phenomena of Teresa levitating, I definitely subscribe to the unreliable narrator perspective going on in this book because something that we see in Latina culture as well, especially I would say in older generations, is the embellishing of their perspective or, you know, trying to make them look much more better.
Yes.
Make themselves look
Like,
better, excuse me.
Almost making something out of nothing as well.
Yeah. So that's
So yeah, I know what you mean. I'm really glad that you brought that up. It's like kind of almost like seeing Jesus in a loaf of bread too. You know, like did that really happen, or was the family just has so much going on and thinking that?
And at the end, close to the end, they kind of even realize that themselves a little bit with the Brujo Contreras that goes over his death, and they mention that Victoria, which is Gonzalo Sr.'s wife, and Valentina, abuelita, they both tell what happened from their own perspective, but between family members, they're like, that's not what happened. Like, something worse happened, and y'all are not going to tell us about it. But for your sake, we're going to go ahead and believe y'all's version of the story, And that's something that I feel is very prominent in the book. You get definitely one side of the story. You don't get both sides. And that's another thing we see again at the end with what happens with Gonzalo and Irai. So I think it's very interesting, when you can't take the soul, you definitely can't rely on just the narrator of that chapter. Sure. You definitely have to take into consideration, like, well, I don't think that's what happened.
That's another part that left a lasting impression on me, where Victoria and Valentina, they go and talk to the Brujo Contreras, and he's on his deathbed and he actually dies.
Before them.
So he asks for forgiveness because of putting a curse on the family, and because
he admits to it.
Yeah, he admits to it. He's like, I put a curse and this is why. And so he dies. And one of the things that was really interesting, and I think it shows the differences in age, is Abuelita is able to forgive him. She goes, I forgive you. And Victoria's like, nah, no. But what was really interesting, and I think it shows their differences in age, is that Contreras, he says, God loves me like he loves you. And Victoria, it outright says in the book, no. No. And I think that it's really interesting that, it plays into the idea that God loves everyone equally. That's what I believe, right? And it's the way I was raised, but I think to say no, I understand, to say no, that no, God doesn't love you how he loves me, or how he loves my family members, or how he loves your daughter, who this was against. No, you put a curse. You made a pact with Satan. God doesn't love you how he loves me. And I think that's really interesting to say, because we're not God. In the book, Victoria's not God. Even Abuelita, she isn't God. We don't know. We really don't know. But I think that's really, I like that we have the elder says, but who knows? Maybe Abuelita doesn't really believe that either,
Exactly.
Maybe we weren't given that perspective for this reason, so that we could have a discussion like this. But I like that it shows those two differences. I think that's really cool, because there are times where injustices happen, in individuals' life, and they can't forgive. They can't, no, I can't. You did this to me. I'm not going to forgive you.
And you can't force someone to forgive you. Like, it's going to take time. Maybe they might not ever forgive you.
And I like that you're saying that, because maybe that's what Victoria was saying. I can't forgive you. No, like, not necessarily that maybe she actually really believes that God doesn't love him, but I don't love you. I'm not going to accept your apology. I'm not, because what you did was just too much.
Yeah.
Too much, which is valid, which is completely valid.
For sure.
And we will be back after these messages.
Libros and Libations is back. BiblioTech Library invites all to join us in our monthly book club. This month's selection, we will be reading The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Join us on July 3rd at 6 p.m. at Burleson Yard Garden.
And now we're back.
Yeah. Were there any other instances in the book that y'all really enjoyed?
Piggybacking on to what you just mentioned, also, I just want to throw out there that Victoria is different from the rest of the family in that she is not Catholic. She is Protestant. So that may also come into consideration as far as, why she might not forgive him. But I kind of like your idea more, where it's like, no, you don't deserve forgiveness. You don't know God like I do. He loves me. He does. So I really like that. Just that pettiness, that anger at everything that's gone on with the family.
Is it even petty? Like,
I think it's justifiable. Yeah.
It's understandable.
Subtract the word petty, but like it's very understandable.
It's understandable, completely understandable, because I feel like any individual has been there in their life, where something happens and they just can't, maybe not at the time. Maybe Victoria later on in her life will be like, no, I understand.
Maybe she has time to process it.
Because
at that moment,
it's very in the moment.
Exactly. It's very in the moment, and you don't know if he's just saying that because he's about to die. So maybe she's like, he's not sincere about it.
You know what would have been really interesting? If, how we were saying that we don't recall, at least we don't recall, that the Family Izquierdo is present in Mass. What if, like, Degollado had chose to show us Victoria at her place of worship?
Interesting.
As a Protestant.
Compared to the family that does not go to church.
That doesn't, or, maybe they do, but we don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
That would have been neat.
That would have been really interesting. I think that would have like changed the dynamic, in many ways. But I mean, that's not what happened. So we actually, in reading the book, my wife, Kimberly, was also reading the book. And so she just wrote something, as Rosa did, so that we could read on air. She said, "The Family Izquierdo captivated me from the outset, immersing me in the lives of the Izquierdo clan. The vivid characterization and engaging writing style are truly exceptional. I admire how the novel's intricate narrative threads and distinct components harmoniously intertwine. It tackles universal themes such as parenting, love, culture, and generational tensions with a relatable touch. The characters feel so real, almost as if I've known them personally. I wholeheartedly endorse the Family Izquierdo." So, yeah. I remember reading it. We had several discussions, me and Kimberly, as we were reading it together. And she actually wrote a question for us. So to discuss, she says, "In what ways does the Family Izquierdo challenge or reinforce stereotypes or misconceptions about the Hispanic community? How does the book contribute to a broader understanding and appreciation of Hispanic culture?" Well, that Amazon review guide.
I know. That's what I was thinking.
Appreciate it at all.
That's what I was thinking too, because I was like, it may like, as a person who is not so in depth into this Hispanic culture in the way that we understand it, that is reading it, it may seem a little stereotypical, the way that they were even describing like Selena, like describing her as a saint, because they were like, oh, she's just so, her music really touches me. Her like,
it even healed my friend.
It even healed a tia, like, from depression or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that can come off a little stereotypical to some people. But I mean, if you're not like completely immersed in the culture, I feel like, it's relatable, There's so many themes that we talked about in this book, but I feel like there's even so many other themes that were untalked about as well. Like, for instance, I don't know why the postpartum depression scene really stuck out to me as well, that Victoria was going through when her and Gonzalo had little Gonzalo.
Yeah.
That's so real,
It really is. And for, Latina author to touch on that, because depression, kind of like with what was going on with Papa Tavo, like a lot of that stuff is still taboo, or it's called like, in this case they reference it,
that's
susto,
not really
sadness, maldiciones,
talked about with the family as well, but he touches on that and gives that like Victoria something even more relatable, because she was going like, no, I have to be the one that does all the household stuff. I have to make sure that I'm okay, the baby's okay, the house is okay. My husband's just going to come home and be like, oh, how was work? And then I have to just be ready for that. So that could be seen as stereotypical as well, but it happens.
I really like that you mentioned that. I had completely forgotten about that part of the book, but it's really important because we see Victoria as this strong woman who, isn't afraid to go toe-to-toe with her husband, raise her child, be a part of the Izquierdo family, even though she's not related to them by blood. But here she is having her own struggle that she's chosen not to talk about. But we still get her reflecting on it. And yeah, that's actually a really powerful moment.
And I think that's, as you mentioned, Ruby, that's extremely present in a lot of Hispanic families, where we don't talk about our feelings or things that are going on, Instead, pray about it, Ask God for help, which I think is a valid thing to do, but it goes back to that: how much control do we have over our lives, over our families, right? To influence and to help us, really. And so it just really shows, how alone we can feel in a gigantic family.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In a gigantic family.
Yeah, that's what that scene really touches base on. Is exactly that, what you said.
Mm-hmm. You know what's really interesting? It doesn't really tie into the question, but we see Contreras die and we see Papa Tavo die. Both patriarchs of their families are dying.
Oh, did not think about it. Like,
and that's really interesting. And I like that. I like that. It's the ending of a generation to an extent, right? We see Contreras' family, only one daughter alive, and we see Papa Tavo's family, he has an army.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, because honestly, because I'm announcing it here, we might interview the author. We have a lot of questions we want to talk to him about, but honestly, I could see a part 2 for this book, them continuing on after the patriarch dies, because that's something that I really reflected on as well when I was reading the book, because this was all in my past, when both of my grandparents were alive from both sides of my family. This is what I was living, this is my life, but now they both passed from both sides of the family. I no longer have any grandmothers or grandfathers, and so now we're living a different life. It's no longer the way it used to be in the book, where the family was all coming together for all these celebrations, going to grandma's house every Saturday or every Sunday. The way all the family just really relied on each other, saw each other, talked to each other all the time. That's not the way it is for my family anymore after the patriarchs died. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm interested in seeing if the author would, write like a second book to see if the family is going to stay together, stay as strong as they are, or if things are just going to fall off.
Right.
That's interesting. I don't know.
That's cool. I like that. And, I guess bringing that up now, the way I'm seeing it is like Brujo Contreras and Papa Tavo died. One was presented to be this good, amazing, just hero, great guy. The other one, just, the villain of the story, terrible, nasty man. But they both died. And you can't say one had a better death than the other, because they both kind of died in not great ways.
Yeah, definitely.
So it just kind of goes to show, no matter how you live your life, you die.
You die.
You're going to die.
I think I'm glad that we have this review from this other individual who kind of missed the point of the book, or just didn't understand it, or didn't attempt to understand. Because one of the things that they say is, aside from Papa Tavo and Abuelita Valentina, the entire family is stricken with a religious fever, more like a disease, right? Which is a powerful word, disease, right? Which oscillates between Catholicism, Pentecostal, and Voodoo. So the brujeria, again, that's perfectly fine, since I am personally acquainted with some of these individuals. But to what end? How do these cultural practices help the story? And to ask a question like that, how these cultural practices help the story, well, it helps us to understand the individuals.
Yeah.
It helps us to understand, why that one family member stays at her house. Why Dianira and Teresa are highly devout, to the point where, she wants the Sigmata, right? Where even Braulio and Eusebio, they, it's only until they're confronted with such a powerful situation that they let their pride go. These are all very, very strong things within a Hispanic family. Strong, devotion to religion, machismo, right? And so I think, this review helps us to understand how stereotypes are prevalent, to outside readers who might not understand Hispanic culture.
Exactly. To us, it might just be everyday normal things, but then, just someone who doesn't live in our neighborhood, it might just be like another stereotype.
Yeah. And so how do these cultural practices help with the story? How do
they not help the story?
Yeah, they're highly needed to understand the story and where these people are coming from. right?
That's crazy. That's
know?
like a whole theme in itself that we can make a whole other episode on, you know.
I mean, just how much we've talked about this book already. There's so much we can cover, so much
Yeah.
we haven't covered, like you said
I
earlier.
know, like exactly, like right now you were talking about the stigmata. I'm like, we didn't even really talk about
and the
that.
stigmata
How
was definitely another powerful scene. My
How
goodness.
Yesenia wanted to wake up on Easter Sunday with blood on her hands the way Jesus did. That's how devoted she was. And she was
and she,
like the
fasted.
youngest.
Yeah,
and
she
was
like,
the youngest daughter too.
That's the thing. It's like, oh my goodness. Like, that's definitely the Catholicism point taken to like the extremes.
Yeah. Another thing that this individual says in their review is also, and most importantly, get ready to be completely overwhelmed with Spanish and Tejano phrases and entire sentences which are sometimes left untranslated, right?
Oh my goodness, again.
It kind of ties it in to individuals who say, speak English, not Spanish. Not Spanish, right? You know, my parents gave me examples, you know, when they were in school where they would be hit for speaking Spanish. Like it's really interesting to read this, because it's like, I mean, well, Hispanics are going to be the largest, you know, group in the United States in a couple of years, you know? So when are we going to be hearing, no, it's not English, it's Spanish, you know? And this is coming from an individual who doesn't speak Spanish great. Like in the book, I could understand everything that they're saying, you know, but my Spanish is horrible. My Spanish is horrible, right? And so I think from their perspective, it's just with that idea. Why did phrases have to be in Spanish? You know, why did there have to be so much Spanish throughout this book? This, you know, did you want to push an audience away? And he ends it with, I almost feel as if the author was writing this book for a group of friends and family and knew that only they would get it, in quotations.
Like, that's a whole nother case of the point went right over your head.
Yeah. This is an invitation. This book is an invitation to immerse yourselves in a culture that is completely different from your own, right? You know, there are religions that I don't know anything of.
Yeah.
You know? But if a book was written in a narrative where it allows for, you know, opportunity to understand, you know, a religion or culture more, like, that's great.
The fact that it was written by a Latino author too just really says something about it as well. You know, it's not like, I don't know, I don't want to bash other books, but like American Dirt, American Dirt, that it was written by a white female, you know, talking about like crossing from Mexico to US, you know, that's like completely different. So I don't know, this is a Latino author who obviously, and in reading his bio as well, definitely just lived through this. He even says in his acknowledgments where he was like, thank you to all my tios and tias, you know, for letting me live through this, and, you know, just write based off of all these people that I know that are in my life.
And he sets it up it's for his people.
Yeah.
His raza, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's for his community. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to read this book, then learn to appreciate a different perspective of your own, you know, or don't, you know, it's also okay. It's also, you know, within this reviewer's, you know, it's within their right to write a review like this, to not want to, you know, try to understand, or maybe they did try to understand and they just couldn't. It was just too much. You should listen to our podcast episode then.
And we will be back after these messages.
Have you checked out Interplay Learning yet? This resource has been building better training, better careers, and better lives for their customers and their employees. The award-winning online and VR training for the essential skill trades is scalable and more effective than traditional training methods. With topics such as HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and more, learning technical skills and becoming certified has never been easier.
And now we're back.
But kind of ending it there. So final thoughts. Really, what do y'all think?
So, real quick about the ending, that it was Seferino's point of view and his family.
Yes.
You know.
Oh yeah, that's a nice.
I want just to mention real quick that in his chapters, in the epilogue, he doesn't really mention religion. It's not as prominent for him and his wife as it is for the rest of the family. And considering he's part of that third generation of Izquierdos, well, in this case, Buentelo, but I just thought that was kind of neat. It kind of shows like maybe they're kind of stepping away from that a little bit. Maybe they're, like you said, with Papa Tabo passing, maybe it is them branching out. They do move all the way to Portland, Oregon. So it's just maybe that time. Like, we need to start doing our own thing. We need to focus on us.
He mentions that as well, because they want to stay in the family suite. And then the owner of the hotel or whatever it is like, no, y'all aren't a family. I want to save that for actual families. And he's like, no, but we are a family. Even if it's just us two, we're a family, so that's a really good touch to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's at this point too where we're kind of hit with our with in the face with racism, you know, with this like he starts internalizing everything that the innkeeper is saying and all that type of stuff. And in the book we didn't touch on any of that really. I mean, of course it was within the family, they're all Hispanic, right? But he's in Oregon, it's not Texas. And I really like, because at first I was kind of like, well, why did Degollado, why did the author end with Seferino? Why Seferino? And I like that, what you're saying, Rosanna, is that within this family there's highly different there's different people that prescribe to different things. We don't know if Seferino is just as Catholic as the rest of his family, because we weren't given that perspective. But what I really like is that it juxtaposes how intertwined and how connected the rest of the book was, right? Everything was connected to their religion, everything was connected to their culture, everything was connected to the curse. And then we see Seferino, they lost their child, him and his wife, and he's confronted with, you're not a family. And he says at the end, we are a family. We are a family. Me, my wife, and my son or daughter, who had passed away. He
says like their family stretches the heaven and earth realm, which I'm like, that's sweet. Yeah, like it's bittersweet.
Yeah,
and I like that. It gives us that the big family, and then Seferino with his family, and enduring the loss of their child is just very different. It's very different, and I think it really shows that even though that they're part of big families, and we saw this with Victoria, and we touched upon this, but how they're their own people.
Exactly.
And they go through their own things, Seferino, I mean, talk to Lalo, talk to your mom, man, or talk to your abuela.
I think they did, because they do mention that, like, the other members of the family, when they were still down there, I guess, in Texas, like, they would come and check on them. They would bring them platos, from San Antonio, stuff like that. Cool. But it just goes to show there's different definitions of family, whether it's, small family, big family, found family. It just matters who you surround yourself with and who you feel comfortable and who you love at the end of the day. And in this case, it's Seferino, his wife, and their angel baby. Their angel baby. That's exactly what they say, our angel baby. And I thought that was neat. I really liked his wife too, because they talk about how she went through her, her depression. She was still getting out of it. And but she's coming back to herself, and it's taking time. It's not something they're trying to force. And
that we can go on about that as well. Like, I really like the way where he was dealing with his own internal thoughts as well. Like, I don't want to do this because it's probably going to make her feel this way. I don't want to do this because then it might make her feel this way.
Yes, I love that. I was talking to Kimberly about that, and how we get that perspective from him, talking about, having relations, with your significant other, and the normal things that, kind of always happen, within a marriage or relationship. And I'm glad that we're given that perspective. I'm glad that, he's a teacher. Seferino's a teacher, and we hear, how he interacts with his students. And I think I really liked the ending. I really liked it. I was a little bit thrown off.
It seemed out of place at first.
It seemed out of place, but it is an epilogue, right? It is an epilogue, right? And I thoroughly enjoyed the book. I'm trying to see if there's a hardcover edition because I like all my books to be hardcover. If not, I mean that's all good. But hopefully there is a hardcover edition so I can purchase that. I'd recommend it to anybody that wants to immerse themselves in Hispanic culture or wants
To learn
something
more,
that-
maybe.
Yeah, to touch. If you want to, if you are Hispanic, I feel like there's parts of the book that can resonate with anybody within that community. Really. What about y'all?
I loved it. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna reread this more than once because I love the
Good.
fact that I was lost in my memories. Like the way he described the house, the parties, everything. I just pictured my own scenery. I just pictured my own scenery with these characters. Like I'm like, oh, this character's like this family member. This character's like this family
Yeah,
member. So
yeah.
I just really vividly saw my past. So I loved everything about it. I would recommend this book to all of my family members and hear their thoughts and see what they thought about it as well.
Oh, it's a fascinating read for sure. It gives you a lot to think about, the good, the bad. Just there's so much to take into consideration. I mean, just listen to how much we talked about it on here. I mean, if that doesn't put it into perspective for you, then I don't know what will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could really go on and on.
Yeah.
There was questions that we didn't get to that we cut. And
So tune into parts 3, 4, and 5 coming over the next few months.
But
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, hopefully we get the chance to interview this author. We've been trying to be in the process of reaching out, so hopefully that is stay tuned.
yeah, that'd be cool. I'd really like to see, the process of writing the book, where his inspiration came from. I'm sure it came from his family. But all that stuff, that'd be great to hear. I think that it'd be a really good conversation to have. I'm
Oh, for
excited.
sure.
Hopefully it happens.
Alrighty, so we are going to wrap it up there because if not, we will keep talking about this book for many hours. So go check it out on Cloud Library. Again, The Family Izquierdo by Ruben Degollado. And just a quick shout out to, and thank you to Kimberly and Rosa for their questions and their input. Very much appreciated, and it gave us a lot to go off of. So if any of our listeners would like to participate in our next book talk, stay tuned and keep an eye out to our Instagram. We will be posting the next book that we'll be reading. Mm-hmm. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or even want to get in on this discussion, just message us and we'll go from there.
Yeah, our Instagram handle is BiblioTech_West. We also have an email that you can reach out to us.
BiblioTechOnAir@gmail.com.
Yes, yeah. BiblioTechOnAir@gmail.com. So again, keep an eye out. And if there's anything you want to submit to us, go ahead and submit it there. But thank you for tuning into this very fun episode of BiblioTech on Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
I'm Israel.
And we'll catch you all next time.